We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast here on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Mark Adams and I am one of your regular hosts, and as always, I'm alongside Kurt North. Hello, Kurt.
All right, dude.
Oh yeah, I should have probably said all right, dude, shouldn't I?
It's
That was
fine.
my opportunity and I missed it.
You missed it. Never
Oh,
mind.
smeg. As always, we do have a third host, and you heard him last week when we were discussing confidence and paranoia. Welcome back, Matt Latham. Hello, Matt.
Hi, so glad to be here again. It's felt like it's been a week since I last spoke to you.
Well, you know, technically in what is the first kind of two-parter of the show rather than standalone episodes, we are looking at Me2, which the cliffhanger at the end of the last episode had two rimmers. This was originally broadcast on the 21st of March 1988. And, as always, we start with a holly gag. And the holly gag was about The Last Chocolate, which is about as British as a sitcom's jokes could be. I do like how this is, even though it's sci-fi, it's still very British.
The jokes are very directed sometimes, and you know it has a tendency. I'm sure we talked about the fact that it's of its time, but I'm actually surprised at how much there isn't so much in season one that I can really recall. There is a couple in this one. Things like Norweb, for example, but
Yes.
But yeah, it is very much aimed at the Britishness, isn't it? I mean, obviously, it becomes a massive thing. Well, not necessarily a massive thing, but it becomes in the consciousness of people in America and things like that as time goes by. But it is very much a very kind of British sitcom, or very British idea anyway.
The episode starts in the quarters, and Lister's is looking through books and videos to find Rimmer's tribute. And Rimmer comes in and they discuss when they used to share quarters because Rimmer's moved out. And Rimmer basically blames Lister for all of his failures. And he's very pleased that he's moving in with Rimmer. And as portents go, this one was a big one, really.
It was, but I think one of the first thing is the pop-up Kumasatra, which I think
Wonderful
is amazing. I think that's incredible. I can only imagine what pictures would be in that book.
I would probably, out of pure morbid curiosity, have a look at the pop-up Kama Sutra.
Matt, what about you? would you have a little deeks into it?
Curiosity, probably, but yeah.
I mean, it's a good gag as well, isn't it? That I wonder if. Right, I'm going to go on Amazon. Bear with me. Does the pop-up Kama Sutra actually exist? Yes, it does exist.
Are you joking me?
The pop-up Kama Sutra is an out-of-print book on Amazon. Wonderful.
Oh,
Wonderful. And it's not like a Red Dwarf thing either. It's got the original Indian artwork on the front. It's real, guys. It's real.
that's brilliant. I never would have thought that would actually be a real thing. Never mind.
I bet it wasn't at the time. I think this is probably a book that's been released subsequently, but still, that's pretty cool.
Oh, fantastic.
He then watches Rimmer's tribute, and this struck me as a funeral celebrant that this does date it, because this kind of thing isn't, at least by some people, isn't considered hokey anymore, isn't considered unusual. I watched a streamed funeral last week. Funerals can involve technology and that sort of thing. It just resonated with me because of what my day job is, that it's interesting that 30 years on, people's attitudes towards funerals has changed.
I think a big element of the humour of this isn't that. I think it's because it's Rimmer's tape of his
there's absolute humour in him narrating his own death.
Yeah, and there's like, in the fact like Lister has to pretty much fast forward through what could only be Rimmer going through some of like the world's most dull, self-indulgent crap. But is this the first instance of the BSc SSC?
Yeah,
I think it is.
Yeah.
The swimming certificates. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's an ongoing gag that I think they maybe didn't even intend to continue, but it's so good that it's worth doing twice, 3 times, many times, isn't it?
It comes up in the Munchkin song as well. And he's also a fantastic swimmer, which I think
It's wonderful, isn't it?
yeah, which is quite interesting. Which is quite interesting that that there's quite good continuity shown at some point, but.
Well, there is. I mean, but again, it goes back to it's good continuity, but the continuity is always within kind of the almost like the character rather than like sort of elements like how many people are on board Red Dwarf, for example, which is really interesting that they do focus so much on the characters, more so than the story or whatever. I know that Rob Grant has actually said in the past that he doesn't mind changing a lot of things around if it services the story that they're telling, I'm quite normally, if it was Star Trek, and I've talked about this before, but if it was Star Trek, I would have a problem with. But with Red Dwarf, it doesn't bother me in the slightest because and that's the unusual thing with Red Dwarf, because I think it is a comedy and it doesn't take itself seriously, and it does have elements like we talked about last week with the Confidence and Paranoia, where the set was I thought was amazing. The external set was amazing, and then we started talking about the washing machine tubes in the space suits, But it knows how to laugh at itself, and it knows how to be what it needs to be. But I think the characters are one thing. I know Matt, you touched upon. I'm sure we'll get into that in later seasons about maybe playing around a little bit with Rimmer's character towards the back end of the seasons. They're finding a new way of dealing with Rimmer and actually bringing the story out. But that just goes back and attests to what they want to do. If it serves the story they're telling, they're quite willing to change things around. I
think because it's a comedy, it is as well as sci-fi. There's some very good, cool, interesting, and innovative sci-fi elements to this. Of course there is, but it's a comedy and it can be forgiven any of its continuity errors. And I've never been the kind of person that actively looks for them, because I feel like that spoils your enjoyment. The thing is, there are some that are so glaringly obvious. The example I always go to, again, it's Buffy, is in season 2, Spike refers to Angel as his sire. But then, subsequently, for a much more interesting story, Angel isn't his sire. And it's annoyed me, but I'm glad, even then, I'm glad they did it, because the backstory of Spike and Angel and Drusilla and Darla is wonderful. But in Red Dwarf, it just doesn't bother me whatsoever.
No, I agree. I think that they do kind of in-jokingly have in-jokes later on in some of the gaps in continuity anyway. I think like the start of Series 8, I'm pretty sure there's like a joke about how everything looks a lot more looks better because of the production budget. But
so this whole thing, Rimmer's eulogy to himself, it's conceited and long-winded. He blames everybody else. But then at the very end, he actually takes responsibility for something, which I thought was really interesting. And that's the last thing he does as a person who is alive, other than say the words, gazpacho soup.
Yeah, but that just goes to attest to his character, though, isn't it? Because it's, as much as he is, I mean, and this episode obviously focuses a lot on the character of Rimmer. And I'm sure we'll get into into the two playing off each other shortly, but there is, we've mentioned it over all the previous 5 episodes that we've done, that the character is thought out, and he's not he's not being like having this attitude for having an attitude reason, or he's not self-important in some ways. There is the glimmer of what he actually wants, and he's overcompensating. And I know we find that out much more as the seasons go on, but it is overcompensation. But at the bottom of it, underneath all that, there is a need to do the right thing in a lot of ways, and I think that's a test to his character, really.
And I think that's really highlighted with the plaque on his new quarters, where it says Second Technician Arnold J. Rimmer and Second Technician Arnold J. Rimmer. The fact that he's on his own with just Lister, but still gets a new plaque made and uses very formal terms, and it's all about the pomposity, but it's all about his desire to still completely stick by and play by the rules. And it's what I did think. Did you notice that his quarters was much bigger? Did you know that his quarters were so much bigger than the one that he shared with Lister, and they had single beds as well?
They're like doubled up, aren't they?
It's not made explicit, but I think they've moved from the worst quarters, which is for the lowly technicians, so they've moved to the next level of quarters.
Again, but they're not bunks either. They're kind of the single beds. They're not like sort of doubled up, and and it's it's interesting how they've got like their own self-help words on the back door as well, which I found quite funny.
I've got a feeling they did that purely because the logistics of trying to do a split screen on bunk beds would be absolutely hideous. I think the reason they probably had those two single beds was probably a technical one.
Have I done a Shakespeare and found something that isn't there?
Maybe, I don't know.
No, I mean, it's always bugged me why they constantly have to share the same bunk anyway, even when the whole of the ship, well, the majority of the ship is accessible. I mean, I was part of me.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I've never fully understood is that I would have thought it would have perfectly been in character for Lister to perhaps move into Hollister's quarters, because I'm assuming the Hollister's quarters would have been like absolutely massive, have its own ensuite, probably a gold statue of Hollister next to it, and that's the one thing, like little tiny bugbear, because frankly you wouldn't have all the setup scenes anyway. But I've never fully understood why Lister never just basically moved into the best one, or have they explained that with the radiation leak? Because it was mentioned in the last week's episode that there are parts of the ship that are
not decontaminated, and Rimmer hasn't got round to it yet.
The officers' quarters aren't decontaminated because Kachansky's quarters were in that, so he couldn't go to Hollister's, but he could have upgraded even to the room next door where the Rimmers move in, Mm-hmm. Oh, well.
You're right, because of the split screen, because I'm looking at the split screen at the moment, and there is the camera angle's slightly different as well, and I think to get more, because they did this it was in Manchester as it happens, wasn't it, that they filmed this? So, and the studios is a lot smaller than what you would get in London. So I think that space is probably at a premium, and being able to move the camera around, especially for split screen stuff, would be a major point in trying to get that round. But then it could just be a showcase of that they have actually moved. So it's an interesting comment though, and it's certainly something to bear in mind.
We have Lister very happy and loud in his own quarters. He's got the bottom bunk, and the Rimmers are already competing with each other in their room with like revision and wake up time and exercise and anything that they can compete against each other. The cat, meanwhile, is looking for a lady cat.
Where did he get a megaphone from? And are they flowers that he had in his hand as well? Wasn't there? There was like literally he's caught in. He's obviously on heat at this point.
Oh yeah, and if he looked any better, he'd be illegal. Apparently, that's actually my line of the. It's always the fucking cat, isn't it? My favourite lines that I quote in daily life. It's always the cat. Oh no! I had a Lister one. It was my plan. I planned it. I still use that. I do use that, but it is mostly the cat, and well. He's reminded by Lister that there aren't any lady cats, or the cats have gone. Again, I've spotted this over the last 6 episodes. They do kind of repeatedly emphasise the backstory of Red Dwarf. as often, like quite often, and I wonder why they do this.
Matt, I don't know what you think. I know I've talked about this before, but what do you think, Matt?
Again, I think this being the first series, I'm guessing that is purely on an expositional basis because, you know, you're gonna have to, if you're gonna have someone watch this for the first time, not everyone's going to be watching the first episode, so you're going to have someone to watch the first episode, and then someone go, oh, you have to watch this show, and then they'll watch episode 2, or later on in the series, and because there was no such thing as catch up, so you couldn't really binge it, so like they kind of have to layer in these kind of ways to tell the audience, this is what you've missed. So, like, just so you can get a full understanding of what's going on, because I mean, like, for example, if you're talking to the cat and you don't know it, and this is the first episode, you've got no idea why he's called Cat. It might be short for Catherine or something like that, and he's just hyperactive. There's got to be some way of hinting about what he is, just not to confuse people who are watching this for the first time. And I think once something's in the greater public consciousness in later series, you don't have to do that, because I think people will probably have a better idea of the characters anyway, and I think the cat becomes a lot less cat-like in general anyway. But yeah, I think a lot of it is perhaps a technical reason to try and briefly explain to new viewers who might not be watching from the first episode, just to not to confuse them.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. So an alarm goes off, which was at 4:30 because the Rimmers competed with each other.
It was originally, wasn't it originally 8:30 that they were setting the alarm for, and they kept arguing amongst themselves about what time it was, because that's the thing that I wouldn't mind posing here actually, is because they're having this argument. It's something that repeats during the course of the episode. Is what I particularly like about this is the way that Chris Barry plays both Rimmers, because he's playing Rimmer as if he's just been activated as like the backup disc that hasn't been backed up since the radiation leak. So he's just come in straight in as he is. Although he's probably even worse than that. So he might even be before the leak, before that actually happened as well. Whereas the other Rimmer has had the life experiences of being dead, coming back, and then having these 5 episodes of living with Lister and the cat and having these experiences altered. And I think that Chris Barry does a really, really good job of subtly changing the way he speaks with regards to both Rimmers. I don't know if you both picked that out, and where you would see that as the episode progresses.
No, I think you're right. And again, I unashamedly will say how brilliant Chris Barry is in this. The character of Rimmer has always been fun to watch, but as I've been taking a more critical viewpoint while we've been doing this podcast, he's just so fucking good, isn't he?
Definitely, yeah. At times it's probably tough to tell which Rimmer's which, because the idea is supposed to be they are very much the same foundational character. But yeah, there is kind of like that kind of subtle difference at times where you can kind of tell, and it's just the way that Barry just does it. And it's just great to watch.
It's also a credit to the writers that they've managed over just 5 25-minute episodes to develop the character of Rimmer, that Chris Barry could do that.
Yeah, I mean, is this technically the first Rimmer-centric episode? I can't remember.
Balance of Power, it was both of them, wasn't it? But it had a lot of Rimmer in because of it. He was trying to vie for the, effectively be the person in charge. I think so. Balance of Power, I would say, probably is this is the closest. Although it dealt with more their relationship rather than the actual Rimmer itself. This one's very much focused on Rimmer.
So yeah, I think it's like the first time we get like a real good look into his psyche. Anyway, so so it's, and again, I think a lot of, and this is one of the biggest main traits of Rimmer is that for all of his misguided belief in himself, he does hold one of the biggest amounts of self-loathing in any fictional character on TV of all time. So, like, I think is it Better Than Life, which Better Than Life kind of emphasises this in a much better way. But here it kind of establishes it, and and it is quite literal in the fact that the person he probably hates the most is himself, and it takes him to live with himself to see that.
The reason it's hinted at how much Rimmer doesn't like himself, but it was Lister's confidence and paranoia that we saw in the previous episode, so this wouldn't have worked with two Listers, for example. So I think it's nicely done, and it's quite clearly a two-part thing where it goes quite heavily into the psyche of Lister in confidence and paranoia, and then goes quite heavily into the psyche of Rimmer in Me Squared. And they couldn't do that with a cat because he's, at the moment, he's just
It's interesting to say that, because obviously with this not being originally planned to go that way, that it has actually formulated in some ways by accident, and a lot of things happen in TV shows and whatever that do happen because of circumstances not withstanding. I think this one there was a electrician strike at the BBC, so they had this extra episode, and I think they moved, from what I remember, I'm just going to have a quick look now. I mentioned last week about the fact that they weren't expecting this, but the actual strike gave them a chance to write a different finale season, it says here. And they did have an episode originally called Body Snatcher, which was going to be the second episode, which is where Rimmer was going to take part of Lister's body and try and make a new body for himself. But they changed that to what we get here, Me Squared. So it's interesting how we've gone from not having this episode at all to getting rid of another episode which was all about body snatching and body parts, to this one which is more featured as a reflection on the previous episode, which is really interesting. Yeah.
And it works really, really well. The alarm goes off and Rimmer wakes up and Lister comes out of his room and Rimmer is in the corridors instructing the scutters to paint the corridors a new grey. Lister hasn't gone to bed yet and refers to Mrs. Rimmer as the other Rimmer. And I think I like this does a lot so quickly. I like the joke about two different greys that you couldn't tell the difference between. I liked Mrs. Rimmer. I thought that was funny. And I also liked the emphasis on how different these characters are. One of them gets up super early in the morning and one of them goes to bed super late at night. And it's got to the point where they cross over. And, you know, I've lived in houses like that.
I am and still am the Lister. Without a doubt. You know, I'm often on the same time zone as my friends over in America, put it that way, rather than being the UK. This is why, for people, obviously this is recorded at a later date, that doing a podcast at 10 o'clock in the morning, I know it's been a couple hours since we've done that, but, you know, is particularly hard on me. So I'm definitely feeling more of a Lister vibe than a Rimmer vibe, absolutely.
And I don't think there's any kind of happy medium. No one goes to bed at 11 o'clock. They either go to bed before 11 o'clock or like 2 a.m. I don't think there's anyone who goes to bed at what would be considered the normal time.
I don't know what Matt's opinion on that is, but I'm definitely do not go to bed the same day that I wake up.
Oh, I don't. I'm quite committed in my going to bed at a healthy time. So, but I usually wake up early. I'm usually awake early anyway. Just to get ready for work, and so I'm around 11 p.m. I'm 11 p.m.
There you
person.
go. See,
there you go.
We're not alike.
I didn't mean to insult you by calling you normal, Matt.
No, none taken. He says, carving an effigy of Mark into his desk.
But the gag about the two different greys, it's so well done to kind of emphasise just how officious Rimmer is, because everybody's met someone that has done something like that, where, why the fuck did you bother? It makes so little difference, you know?
It comes back to that when Rimmer is actually, then he's changed it back from military grey back to ocean grey. And I like that, because again, that shows the difference in the two Rimmers. That the first Rimmer is very much, you know, he's not what he is now. You know, he's changed, and you know, he's come to accept some of the things that that would happen as you are everything around you will support what happens to you from a character perspective. People will inform you. We've been joking around these past 6 episodes that that you say so many things that the cat says. I know for a fact that I've got a friend who's a Yorkshireman, and I use some of his terminology. You know what I mean? And then you speak to other people, and humour is informed by people that you're around that obviously we're not seeing at the moment due to the crisis. But your humour's probably based around people that you know. So I think that the fact that Rimmer's been, he isn't happy when he's changing back to Ocean Grey, but that whole kind of circle of like you've been changed by the people that you've been with over these past 6 episodes is really pertinent to this episode and understanding that.
So at this point, Lister asks him about gazpacho soup. Rimmer refuses to give him anything, so he sneaks into Rimmer's quarters and reads his diary. And November 25th, apparently, was gazpacho soup day.
The fact the diary starts off as January 1st, my God, it's going to be my thoughts and deeds over the coming year. The next entry's not to July the 17th.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really good. I thought that, yeah, that's me. I would go, yeah, I'm going to start doing this. And then, within literally not even 24 hours, then you haven't put anything in. And it takes you to like 7 months later before you put, oh, it's Auntie Maggie's birthday. And then we get to this Dispatcho soup day, which is interesting to put a date on it as well, because that's 6 weeks before the crew get done, really. So it's interesting that happened that 6 weeks ago, which then led me to ask the question, and it's only just come to me now, is this Rimmer before Gazpacho soup day?
Oh, maybe it is. Huh. I hadn't clocked that at all.
I've only just thought about that now, because it's 6 weeks before the crew gets destroyed, and has the actual new Rimmer not experienced the fact of the embarrassment of what happened? That's what I've just suddenly thought of that now.
Is that not confirmed then? I just thought it was a backup.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. But I'm just like putting into my whole kind of my own headcanon here that he's definitely different. He's just a backup. But when was that backup made?
Yeah. How recently was it updated? Because they've been outside the ship for a certain amount of time, so it's definitely after Rimmer was...
Because you'll get versions, don't you? You get version history. So the fact that Rimmer might not have just activated the last version, he might have activated the version before.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because like you said before, there are two not very, but slightly different Rimmers, and Chris Barry does that really well. So I think it's got to be... It's clever. And the fact that it's made us think... Again, shows us that it is much more sophisticated than perhaps we ever thought when we were watching it when we were younger.
Yeah, I mean, I might be giving it a bit too much credit. It might just, they just thought, oh, it's back up of. It's just the first Rimmer we see back in the end. You know what I mean? Because it probably is that. But I think it would add more credence if you filled in the gaps and said that this Rimmer that's been activated is an actual version. Like, and I'm sure we'll probably... as a supplementary episode is something I've been thinking about recently, that we need to, and I know you haven't seen the Dave episodes, Mark, but I think we need to kind of have a discussion on Rimmer and the various different versions of him. Okay. Because there must be about at least 10 versions of Rimmer. So you've got this one for a start off. You've got the live one in the end. You've got this one. So we've already got 3 versions, I think, haven't we? So we've got
Ace as well.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking just up to this episode. So we've got the living Rimmer, a hologram Rimmer, and a backup hologram Rimmer. So we've already got 3 Rimmers in the space of 6 episodes.
That's more Rimmers than many people would want.
Yeah, but it's certainly worth diving into, because as you get into, as you say, Ace Rimmer, there's a couple of versions of Ace Rimmer. There's
Evil Future Rimmer.
Yeah, Evil Future Rimmer, so there's a lot, and then you've obviously got I'm trying to think what the other one I'm thinking of is. Like in season 8, there's Human Rimmer as he was.
Yeah. Does the Inquisitor count as another Rimmer?
Maybe.
There's many Rimmers.
Rimmer World.
Rimmer World Rimmer.
There's a lot.
That's a lot of Rimmers.
There's a lot of rumours. A handful of rumours.
Taking out of context, that line might be
that did also strike me. So moving swiftly on to something much more sensible. Yes. The cat has done a shit in his locker. Oh wait, that's not more sensible.
I just love that though. It's like, you can't see me. You can't see me.
I think what's important is that it establishes that the cat, however callous he might have been to Lister in the past, he's not shit in his locker. So there is a difference between the affection that the cat has for Lister and for Rimmer.
I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because he's still a cat, but even cats have favourite people.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
We head back to Lister's quarters, and he's measuring his bubblegum bubbles. Holly tells him that there's a ship tracking them from Norweb, and that...
I love this bit. This is one of my favourite bits in the series.
And he says that there's a mould from a left sausage has taken over 7/8 of the Earth, and interest on his bank account means that he has 98% of the world's health. And
£17.50.
Yeah, and Lister's horrified, to which the response from Holly is April Fool. And it's just great.
And do you know what I found out recently as well on that is that because it's filmed in front of a live audience, that Norman Levitt had to put that mask on literally within the time frame of it being filmed.
Amazing.
So rather than sort of being done in post, it was literally gone right. Delivers his line, goes back into his booth. They turn the booth off so no one can see him. He puts it onto his head, and it's supposedly in rehearsals he's poked his eye out, but put it on, and then he's ready for the gag. And I thought, the fact that it's done, and there's another one which you won't know yet, Mark, but in season 10, which is played, and you can totally tell they're living off the audience. And that's one thing that I think is brilliant, that they do live off that kind of live theatre vibe as well. So yeah, but I think he's finally got £180 billion.
I think if you'd have asked me who my second favourite character is, it would have been Holly, because particularly the Norman Lovett version, because there's just a great deadpan scene stealing, and
yeah.
I mean, in later seasons when he shows up, the other cast just say that they have to stop because the crowd reaction constant. Whenever he shows up, if he's not been on screen for years, the crowd reactions go on for absolutely ages when he appears, and you can kind of see why.
Yeah, it's just a shame it wasn't your favourite character.
I know.
Really, never mind.
But you're so right about the deadpan. That Norman Lovett is one of the most talented deadpan comedians I think we have in Britain, and that's just emphasised by how well he plays Holly.
Because of the term April Fool, I sometimes get this mixed up with his revealing Queeg, where he goes, we're talking April, May, June, July, April Fool. June, July Fool, and because he uses April Fool, I always sometimes mistake that line about him going, we're talking April, June, July. I always mistake that for this one as well. But I just love this bit. It's great. It's a lot shorter than I remember it being, but it's still brilliant. And it's the timing of the punchline with him showing up with the mask on. It's brilliant, perfectly well timed, and it's just If you wanted an example of why Holly is popular and people keep asking about Norman Lovett when he wasn't there, then this is one of the scenes that you show why he's quite liked amongst the fans.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah.
And you would definitely Queeg is by far the exceptional episode for him. But yeah, we'll get into that when we get there. Cause
I'm looking forward to Queeg.
Yeah, because Queeg is. I don't think I've laughed so much on a reveal in the entire run of the show. I've laughed at jokes, and I've laughed at obviously laugh a lot at the episodes. I mean, the only things that I can think where I've probably laughed more, like at the time of the reveal, is that, and probably the scene where he's getting attacked by the polymorph with the boxer shorts. I think that those two are like the outstanding laugh out moments for me in the show's run. But
that said, I think the Promised Lands has got some Holly moments which could theoretically stand up alongside this and Queeg, But because Norman Lovey gets some amazing bits in that, which watching I think could deserve to be alongside this bit and Gwig as well. So
yeah, I mean, there's a certain comment about a moon as well, which I find hilarious. So there's loads we can talk about Holly, but I'm sure we'll get to them as we head through the season.
Rimmer and Rimmer are in their quarters and they're bitching at each other, and it all culminates with one of the Rimmers calling the other Rimmer Mr. Gazpacho. And our Rimmer storms out and heads into Lister's quarters with the excuse of Lister's still got some of his blue tack. And, yeah, I think that this really is a two-parter, because it's very similar to Confidence and Paranoia arguing with each other. And it's another slap round the face, and the message is nobody hates you more than yourself.
Yeah, I think it works to that degree as well, because it's just the way that, you briefly talked about this a few episodes ago, about in Future Echoes, I think is the episode. I think that'll be the standout moment for our podcast. But yeah, I think the fact that, you think you'd get on with yourself, but, you're so alike that, you would see the flaws that's within you, and you think about, even think about yourself, and things that you may have done or you've done wrong, or the events that have happened because of something that you've done wrong, and you think, how could I have done that better? And if you really look at yourself, you can see the frailties in your personality, and I think this is a good way of showcasing that.
It's Rimmer having to come up against his greatest opponent, which is himself.
But it does emphasise the level of conceit in Rimmer. Most people wouldn't want a hologram of themselves as a companion. We've all probably worked out it would be a bad idea, but Rimmer actively wanted this and gets burnt by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it's his, to use an actual term, Johari window. People research that whenever they want, but yeah, it's kind of his utter belief that his ultimate aspirations are blinding him to the fact of who he really is, and the fact that, by inviting a second Rimmer on thing, he thinks that that's going to be brilliant. And he's not thinking about his frailties; he's thinking about what he aspires to be, which in itself informs his character. So I think that's. It's interesting from that point of view that he's kind of like, he's just not seeing. He doesn't know that about himself, and he's willing to invite himself, as tongue-tied as that gets.
Tongue-tied?
He invites himself, yeah, and let's not talk about tongue-tied yet. But yeah, so it informs himself, and he obviously doesn't see he's blindsided by the fact that, that's who he is, and he's not willing to see that until obviously he has to deal with it in real life circumstance.
So the next scene is the Cat and Lister watching a film in the cinema, and original Rimmer joins them. But there's a conversation about smoking that, again, really dates this. No cinema would allow you to have a ciggy anymore.
It's legal for a start.
Yeah.
So, I put that down on my notes, actually, that the fact that, how times have moved on, the fact there's a smoking area. They even mentioned smoking in the quarters as well. They said, why put in a no smoking sign when there's no, there's no actual, both of you don't smoke? Why would you do that? Which obviously informs his character as well. But I do find it interesting. It's the second time we've seen this cinema screen as well. I think it does show just how dated that is, because I don't know when the smoking ban came in. It must have been, I don't know. It's definitely still around early 2000s, wasn't it?
Let me think. I was about 24, 25, so that would make it about early thousands, maybe 2003, 2004 as a guess.
2007.
Yeah. Was it that late?
It was 2007. I know that because I'd started going out to that club.
That club.
Yes.
You're so street, Matt.
Well, in the previous episode we talked about picking up stuff from pop culture. That is a running joke on another podcast I listen to about going to that club. Because I remember going, and when I first started going out, this was like 2006. The smoking was in there, and you'll come home and it'd be clouds will smell of cigarettes and stuff. And it was around about May or June 2007, because in the space of a week, I remember going out and it was like smoking and everything, and then the smoking ban came in, and it smelled different, it looked different.
I remember the smoking ban vividly because I had shoulder length or longer hair at the time, and what you were talking about, the your clothes smelling of smoke, my hair would smell of smoke when I got home from from going out, and I still didn't like the smoking ban because I've always liked dive bars. And the problem with the dive bars, when there was no cigarette smell to smell, you could smell their crap toilets and the fact that basically the bar smelt of piss. But yeah, I think what's fascinating about something that is, 32 years old now? Did we say 1988? Yeah, 32 years old, roughly.
Yeah.
Is what isn't incongruous and what is. It doesn't bother me whatsoever that they don't have mobile phones, for example. That isn't something that really clicks in my head that, isn't that weird? But the smoking really, really did click as that's weird as fuck, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from a sci-fi element, you don't really need a mobile phone, do you? Because you just call it. That's like, because you get like Holly saying, such and such to the drive room or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can talk about that, but smoking, I think it's just it'd be interesting because we've all lived through that period. So I remember it coming in. I remember them talking about cars, whether or not smoking in cars was right. And then the queues started to form outside of bars and stuff like that. Where if you had someone that was born, just say as early as 1999. Then they wouldn't have lived through that. They would just be something that they're used to.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to see if that was a big change. If someone was watching who's maybe 18, 20 years old, then how would they view that? With the fact of smoking, it's what do you mean? Because it's second nature to them.
Mm-hmm. So, still in the cinema, our Rimmer comes in, has a conversation about smoking, and then tells him that he studied film at night school, but then thinks that cartoons are Orson Welles. And everybody again has done this. They think you're an expert. You think you're an expert in something, and then you get egg on your face after you've just said that you're an expert in something. And Rimmer is just he's just the perfect guy, the perfect character to put all this shit on that everybody's done, I think.
He's pretty much that. So like all the idiocies that people do that drive people nuts, the perfect character to demonstrate that would be Arnold.
And again, similar gag is the whole crux of this episode, isn't it?
Yeah.
The other Rimmer enters and sits in front of Rimmer, and they argue, sit in front of each other, and Lister loses his temper and says one of them's got to go and does an ippy-dippy. He's talking about someone's fucking life here, and he does an ippy-dippy, and it's just the utter kind of ridiculousness of this. It's not who's going to go first in hide and seek. This is someone's fucking life, and I just found it really funny.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, that's funny. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Very occasionally, I have to pause something because I've lost my shit and I can't stop laughing. And the ippy dippy got me this episode. I was like, this is so callous. And but they've been like this to each other throughout the whole series. They've been really, really mean to each other, even though they genuinely care about each other.
But what I like about the Ippy Dippy though is the fact that, and you get this, is that he knows who to start on to make sure he gets the right answer, and that's been a case for like many a person. That if they're clever enough, they can go, oh, we can do Ippy Dippy and see who does it. But if you know which person to start on, it's going to land on them.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a trick. But I think that Lister's actually done that here. He's actually done the trick because he knows he wants to pick our Rimmer because he then wants to get the story. Because it's all about getting the story of the gazpacho soup. That's all it's about. So he's like, right, okay, if I pick Rimmer, then I'll delete the other Rimmer and I'll get the information about gazpacho soup. And, but also on top of that, there's also an added layer of he does actually, you mentioned that brotherly thing. He doesn't want to lose the current Rimmer because, to be fair, he's the lesser of the two evils, effectively.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he still wants to know this gazpacho soup story as well. So it's multi-layered from that point of view that, he's done it on purpose. It is funny. He knows exactly what's going to land on, and he knows exactly what he's going to do as well, which I think is genius. Street
smarts, isn't it?
Yeah, street smarts, but probably the best word. Yeah,
absolutely.
I
think it's so what we were saying last week in terms of how Lister's got, he's quite clever when the situation applies to it. So he might not be intelligent in terms of knowledge or engineering or anything, but when it comes to smarts and perhaps improvisation, then he's quite savvy in terms of knowing what to do or clever enough to set things up. And to be fair, I never actually clicked to my head that he probably would have ippy-dippied.
I'm sorry, every time anyone says ippy-dippy,
he's got again.
I start giggling.
Ippy-dippy to death.
Oh, don't.
And that's what this podcast is for. It's to make Mark laugh on ippy-dippy.
The sign, yeah. And what we should do is rename the podcast Signs of Ippy-dippy.
Oh, stop it.
Welcome
right, look. They go to the fucking drive room. Shut up. They go to the drive room, and Lister asks the second Rimmer to leave, and our Rimmer, as I've been calling him, arrives in his full military regalia. And Lister's like, what are the medals for? 2 years long service, 5 years long service, 12 years long service. Wonderful gag. Absolutely wonderful gag.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite moments, actually. It's just like, oh, he's got some medals. Right, okay, what's it for? 3, and it's the way he delivers it. It's like 3 years, 6 years young service, and then he goes 9 years young service, and then he goes 12 years young service.
The pause is all it is, isn't it? It's wonderful.
It's the timing. It's the timing of this. The last one is.
So he's trying to remember what it's for.
Yeah. And what I did like about this scene was it was actually really quite sensitively done. It was Lister's quite respectful in a way, which Rimmer did not give him that courtesy when he saw Bexley die. But he salutes him properly, doesn't take the piss, and he does genuinely show an interest over the medals. He offers him a drink, which Holly gives him. And I think, beyond the fact he was trying to get the gazpacho soup information, I think he was genuinely being quite kind here.
Yeah, I saw that. I think it comes out as the empathy again comes out on him. And it's just the way that, as you say, that he actually he kind of lures into a false sense of like, oh right, okay, this is the end kind of thing. And Lister obviously knows what he's doing, but at the same time, he knows that Rimmer is thinking that he's going to die, and this is the end of him. So I think it is done in a way that, that Lister's being quite respectful of that moment, and as you say, Rimmer might take that differently. So yeah, it is a good point, and just goes to show the empathy of Lister, really.
Yeah, and it's the first time he actually salutes where he's not taking the piss as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because he doesn't do Rimmer's silly salute. He does an actual. He even holds his posture and does an actual salute, which I noticed, and we've been saying how great Chris Barry is at showing the situation with his body language and his slapstick. But on this one, good work by Craig Charles, I thought, as well.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, you're right. It goes back to humility again, I think. Just short of him wearing a suit, though, because he's just wearing a London Jets t-shirt. But
well, yes.
Never mind.
There's a line. You can be respectful, but you've still got to do you. So Rimmer tells him the story that he was invited to dine with the captain for the first time in 14 years and didn't know that gazpacho soup was cold, so asked the chef to warm it up. And they all laughed at him because he didn't know. It was just a cultural thing he wasn't aware of. And he's clearly clung on to that as something to blame, which is very quintessential to the character of Rimmer, that he's always got to cling on to something or someone to blame why he's not as successful as he wants to be. And then the cat gets bored and asks Lister to get on with it.
Do you know what I find really interesting, though? I think it's a lovely little moment, is just before that, there's a scene where Rimmer, like, walks, he's obviously wearing his suit, and he walks across the screen, and in the background, Cat's having a nap.
Kitty is Kitty.
Yeah, which I think is brilliant.
Interestingly enough, does it say how long ago this was in terms of how long the gazpacho soup was in terms of Rimmer's conception of time? Because he states he's been with the company for 14 years, and he's got 12 years long service. Is it supposed to be quite recent?
It was 6 weeks before the radiation.
Yeah. Okay. So they just didn't bother. So it didn't come to, I was thinking whether they just got to a point where they just couldn't be bothered to give him long service. So if it was if he reached 15, they just didn't bother. But I'm assuming he didn't reach 15 years at this point then.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. 15, yeah.
Oh yeah. Nice spot.
It's okay. I've got the quote on a screen. In 14 years, the quote where it mentions 14 years in capitals is just directly underneath where it mentions 12. And I just saw that. And I'm like, oh yeah.
He's told the story, and the cat said, "On board, let's do it." And Lister points out that he's already done it. He wiped the second Rimmer. And Rimmer loses his temper and says, "Don't ever bring it up again." Lister promises he won't, and then the very last line of the series is super.
Yeah, super.
It's wonderful.
It's that banter again, isn't it? You know, it just sums up. It sums up where they are, I suppose, as well. You know, where the whole 6 episodes have come to. That the final thing is just them. You know, he's played off on that. That said, don't mention it again, and the fact that Lister's willing to have that little dig at him compared to all the humility that's just been given him literally 2 or 3 minutes before that.
It's kindness with a wind up, and if that isn't real friendship, I don't know what is. Matt, what was your favourite part of the entire episode?
I think it's one of the foundational scenes of Rimmer's character, and I think probably one of the more important ones to help us as an audience understand just his psychology. But it's when basically he has the soliloquy, his gazpacho soup soliloquy at the end. Like it says, I bet Ted Hunter was fed gazpacho soup as soon as he was on solids. No, I bet he was on breastfed on it. One side gazpacho soup, the other side chilled champagne. It's just, I think Chris Barry goes through a load there, and it's quite light on jokes, or at least laugh out loud stuff. But it's all in character, and it just helps you get an understanding of Rimmer as a character, and a lot of the stuff that gets explored later on can be based down on what we learn from this one. So I'm going to go for that scene.
All right, and how about you, Kurt?
This is a difficult one. I think, apart from the ones that we've mentioned, the likes of Holly and the Norweb joke, and potentially the super, which is what I before out of this episode of talking to it. That's how I talked to you this morning when I sent a message saying super.
You did.
I did. So, but I think I quite like the kind of the on the nose jokes at the very beginning, and when they said that Rimmer had tied Lister's hair to the bedpost and set the fire alarm off because he needed brain surgery. I thought that was quite nice, because that's not something that we really see, and it's not something we would see from Rimmer either, really. So. It's out of character, but I actually quite like the concept and would like to see that happen. But the way that Rimmer, the way that Lister, explains that, I think works really well. The only thing I would like to mention just at the end of this one is on a separate note to the thing. So that's my moment. Would be the use of Esperanto through the ship and the thing. I don't know if you know too much about Esperanto at all.
It's a weird language that never picked up, right? That was supposed to mix all of the European languages into one weird-ass combo.
Yeah, so it was supposed to be like the second language of anyone. So it would be, if English is the first language of the majority of people, then Esperanto would be, as you say, a mix of whatever. But it's interesting that they use that, because that sort of disappears, well before this is aired. But they kind of bring that back as that people have gone on from there and they've actually have created this second language, and it's plastered all around the ship. Like the cinema sign, for example, I can't remember what it said now. I think it was like Kino or something, which means cinema. So I thought that's interesting that they use that throughout all the signs on the Red Dwarf itself. So that's just something I've noticed before.
No, I hadn't noticed that. I just thought that they were taking the piss out of Esperanto because it was fundamentally piss-takeable.
I think they are doing that.
All right.
But they use that as well in later series, don't they? Esperanto, like the actual ships, the Esperanto and stuff like that. So it's something that's obviously in the mind. But I just thought it's an interesting concept that's just hiding in the background. Just something that I've not really thought about until recently, and it was just interesting to note that, really.
Well, unsurprisingly, my favourite bit is the ippy dippy. So I'm a predictable creature of habit. What can I say?
Fantastic.
I have just looked it up, by the way, boys. If you want a copy of the pop-up Kama Sutra, it'll cost you £4.94 plus £2.80 delivery off Amazon.
Right, I will get to that as soon as I come off here.
Brilliant. So, Matt, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet. Where can they? Oh, yes. They can find me via my podcast, Pick a Disc, where I speak to people who have picked a disc, which is, clever name, I think. I know. But for whatever reason I want to. So it's a music-based podcast, and I know the two of you have been on it to talk about albums you've picked. Kurt's even hosted a second episode when he interviewed me about an album as well. And you can find me on usual podcast apps and Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram on Pick a Disc.
Kurt, where can people find you?
Pretty much anywhere on the We Made This Podcast network, on Matt's podcast, on Don't Mention the C Word, which is your podcast. But the main ones that I currently am on are the Xcast, which is an X-Files podcast, and that's the X_cast. The Millennium podcast, which is a spin-off from the X-Files, starring Lance Henriksen, and that is at The Time Is Now Pod. That's on Twitter. And the Star Trek podcast that I am on with Tony Black, and that is the Make It So podcast. We're currently looking at Star Trek Discovery. We did the first 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard, and you can find that at Jean-Luc Podard. So those are the three ones I'd like to mention now. At time of recording, we've literally just started the Fight the Future Minutes, which is the X-Files film that came out in 1998. We're going through that film minute by minute. So we are literally doing a podcast every day for the next 200 days or so.
Bloody hell!
Which is great. Yeah, it's going to be a good one. So that's just kicked off as we record, but it'll be in the midst of it when this one airs. Or so I don't think it'll be finished just by the time this airs. So it'll be a good chunk through it. So that's something. If you are interested by minute podcasts and you're interested in the X-Files, might be a good jumping in point. Yes, that's where you can find me at the moment.
Well, I'm also all over the We Made This Podcast network. I've guested on Pick a Disc, like we mentioned. I've also been on Without a Mouse a couple of times. I basically have this podcast, which is seasonal, but I have a weekly podcast, which is Pull or Pass, at Pull or Pass on Twitter. That is a weekly review show for comic books and comic book news. And I then have a fortnightly podcast called Life's Milestones, which is based around my job as a humanist celebrant. So I talk about birth and naming ceremonies, relationships and weddings, and death and funerals. And that's fortnightly at Life Milestones on Twitter. And if you want to find me, that's at Mark Adams HC on Twitter as well. And that's all we've got time for on Shipwrecked and Comatose for this season. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back soon with Series 2. Well, we'll be looking at Series 2. So until then...
Nah, she's not my type.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The Time Is Now, a Millennium podcast.
You've actually managed to get on 12 episodes of Season 2. I'm thinking that you quite enjoyed Season 2. I counted this up before.
See, that's why you're the host and I'm the podcast and talking dude. But wow, 12, that's amazing. I am stunned by that fact. I am very sorry, listeners. But no, absolutely thrilled. Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
That would probably equate to about 24 hours worth of Darren Mooney. I think it works out somewhere around there.
Yeah, it probably does. I'm also sorry for that, listeners.
It's absolute goldmine of information. I love it, Darren.
I'm in a band podcast.
Some bands record in standard tuning, but then when you go see them live or hear a live album, it's in E flat. But I think it's for maybe the vocalists.
I was just going to say, is that to save like vocal strain live? Perhaps. I know Green Day. They've always done that.
Have they?
Fair.
Yeah, they're one of those bands. A lot of punk bands do it.
Maybe we should do that.
What are you saying, man, about my vocals? You said maybe we should do that. What are you saying? What are you insinuating?
Ding ding.
Just
Round
saying,
one.
Just saying maybe you might want to think about, extending your range a little bit. I don't know.
Oh, burn.
The Movie Palace.
How do we feel as keen cinema goers about the potential for cinemas to reopen? And you can answer this on like a personal front or as an abstract point, I guess. Kaletri, how about you?
For me personally, I miss the cinemas like anybody. To kind of use a very popular science fiction analogy, the idea of, going into the cinema, finding your screening room is like stepping into another dimension. And behind that door is a story to be told.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.